Hi guys, welcome to Short Skirts and Sarcasm. I'm Caroline, and today I will take you through all the recent Kindle purchases I have made. So this is a book haul, but maybe not a traditional one because I don't have any actual books to show you. These are all books I bought on Kindle because I have a problem with buying Kindle books when they are reduced to 99p. So I will go through my list in alphabetical order. There are quite a few. As you can see, this is my list. Some of these are books in a series, so if I've got more than one, I will lump them all together, because otherwise they would be out of order in the alphabetical list, and my organization brain can't deal with that. So first, I got Because of Miss Bridgerton, and this is a Bridgerton's series prequel series of its own, and they think it's the start of a new one. Goodreads says it's Rokesby's #1, so presumably it's the beginning of a new series. So I read the first Bridgerton book. I've already forgotten what the name of it was, and I have the second and the third one, so I will get to them eventually. And they're, at least the first one was a pretty quick read, so I'm expecting that from the rest of the series as well, and this one. So this is about Billy Bridgerton and her friendship with the Rokesby boys. There's only one Rokesby Billy absolutely cannot tolerate. That's Billy with an IE, so she's a girl, I think. And that is George. He may be the eldest and the heir to the earldom, but he's arrogant, annoying, and she's absolutely certain he detests her, which is perfectly convenient as she can't stand the sight of him either, because when Billy and George are quite literally thrown together, a whole new sort of sparks begin to fly. And when these lifelong adversaries finally kiss, they might just discover the one person they can't abide is the one person they can't live without. So this sounds like a cute romance. Next up, I have Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee by Dee Brown, and this is a nonfiction book that's been on my radar for a while. I think it's been out for 30 plus years, so I am a little bit late to the party on this one, but I'm hoping to get to it soon. A fully documented account of the systemic destruction of the American Indian during the second half of the 19th century. Using council records, autobiographies, and first-hand descriptions, Brown allows the great chiefs and warriors of the Dakota, Ute, maybe it's Ute, Sioux, Cheyenne, and other tribes to tell us in their own words of the battles, massacres, and broken treaties that finally left them demoralized and defeated. A unique and disturbing narrative told with force and clarity, Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee forever changed our vision of how the West was really won. So I'm pretty stoked for this. I know it's going to be a huge bummer. You can tell just by the description. It's not going to be a happy story, clearly. And I did recently read Killers of the Flower Moon, which was also about systemic oppression of Native American people. That one specifically starts out with a murder, and then to understand how the murder happened and who did it, etc., it goes into more background, and it's very good. I would definitely recommend that one. I can't remember who wrote it. I think it's some guy named David. Moving on. Choose Your Own Disaster by Dana Schwartz. And I came across this memoir when I was looking to pre-order Dana Schwartz's new book, Anatomy, a Love Story. And it comes out in February of 2022, and I'm not sure what my address will be then. I'm not sure if I'm going to move. So I am waiting until I know for sure where I'm actually going to be before I pre-order it, because as of right now, there's no Kindle to pre-order. It's only a physical copy. And the cover is beautiful, so I definitely do want a physical copy. And I'm pretty stoked for this one. But Dana is the host of a podcast called Noble Blood about aristocratic history and the more gruesome side of it. And I would definitely recommend that, and I will put a link to it in the description box so you can check that out. So this is a memoir, and join Dana Schwartz on a journey revisiting all the awful choices she made in her early 20s through the internet's favorite method of self-knowledge, the quiz. Part memoir, part very long personality test, Choose Your Own Disaster is a manifesto about the millennial experience in modern feminism and how the easy advice of you can be anything you want is actually pretty difficult when there are so many possible versions of yourself it seems like you could be. Dana has no idea who she is, but she at least knows she's a Carrie, a Ravenclaw, a Raphael, a Belle, a former emo kid, a Twitter addict, and a millennial just trying her best. This long-form personality quiz manages to combine humor with unflinching honesty as one young woman tries to find herself amid the many, many choices that your 20s have to offer. So Dana Schwartz has actually written a few books. both fiction and nonfiction, which I didn't know. I just know her as the host of Noble Blood. So after I read this, I will definitely continue on my Dana Schwartz binge. I mean, I think this video is the start of me becoming a Dana Schwartz fan channel, and I think that's okay. Next up, I have City of Brass, and then the two other books in this series, which are Kingdom of Copper and Empire of Gold, I think. And I know this features gin in some way, and like the genie kind of gin, not the alcohol gin. And I generally like stories with gin in them, so I have high hopes for this. I've heard nothing but good things. Nari has never believed in magic. Certainly she has power. On the streets of 18th century Cairo, she's a con woman of unsurpassed talent. But she knows better than anyone that the trade she uses to get by, palm readings, czars, healings, are all tricks, sleights of hand, learned skills, a means to the delightful ends of swindling Ottoman nobles. But when Nari accidentally summons an equally sly, darkly mysterious djinn warrior to her side during one of her cons, she's forced to accept that the magical world she thought only existed in childhood stories is real. For the warrior tells her of a new tale across hot windswept sands teeming with creatures of fire and rivers where the mythical married sleep, past ruins of once magnificent human metropolises, and the mountains where circling hawks are not what they seem, lies Davabad, the legendary city of Brass. So that sounds intriguing and amazing and complicated and fantastic. Next, I have Detransition Baby by Tori Peters, and this was nominated for the Women's Prize in Fiction. I think it was longlisted but not shortlisted. And I know that because the author is a trans woman, some people got angry about it, which is silly because trans women are women. The end. Reese almost has it all: a loving friendship with Amy, an apartment in New York City, a job she didn't hate. She'd scraped together what previous generations of trans women could only dream of, a life of mundane bourgeois comforts. The only thing missing was a child. But then her girlfriend Amy detransitioned and became Ames, and everything fell apart. Now Reese is caught in a self-destructive pattern, avoiding her loneliness by sleeping with married men. Ames isn't happy either. He thought detransitioning to live as a man would make life easier, but that decision cost him his relationship with Reese, and losing her meant losing his only family. Even though their romance is over, he longs to find a way back to her. When Ames's boss and lover, Katrina, reveals that she's pregnant with his baby and that she's not sure whether she wants to keep it, Ames wonders if this is his chance, the chance he's been waiting for. Could the three of them form some kind of unconventional family and raise the baby together? So this sounds kind of like Jane the Virgin. It's my immediate thought. I have read not many books featuring a trans main character. Like, I've read a few, but not enough. So I'm very pumped for this one. Next up, I have Djinn Patrol on the Purple Line by Deepa Anapara, and I have already read this one. It was nominated for the Women's Prize for Fiction in 2020, and I read it when it came out, but I got a library ebook. So I loved it so much, and I would really like to read it again. So when it came up as discounted, I bought it immediately. So children, Jai and his friends Pari and Faiz decide to investigate the disappearances of children in their neighborhood. And Jai watches a lot of police dramas on TV and is therefore confident that he can solve the mystery. And he also has a lot of self-confidence in his own intelligence, even though his friends are maybe more intelligent than he is. So I won't be reading it again soon because it's very heavy because it is about the disappearance of children. But it was great and I would recommend it absolutely. And one day I will reread it. Moving on, Girl in Hyacinth Blue by Susan Vreeland. And this has been on my radar for a while. I think a lot of people love this, and it's also described as a book that fans of the other historical fiction book about Vermeer, Girl with the Pearl Earring. And I read that and really liked it. I would like to reread that one actually, because it's been a while. I read it when I was in my early teens. But digression aside, back to this. A professor invites a colleague from the art department to his home to view a painting he has kept secret for decades in Susan Vreeland's powerful historical novel. The professor swears it's a Vermeer, but why exactly has he kept it hidden for so long? The reason unfolds in a gripping sequence of stories that trace ownership of the work back to Amsterdam during World War II and still further to the moment of the painting's inception. So this sounds like historical fiction, World War II. We all know I love a sad World War II story. And I get a lot of these book deals through BookBub, which is a email newsletter that emails you every day with ebook bargains in your preferred genres. And it works for Kindle and I think Apple Books and Kobo and maybe also Nook and maybe a few others. I'm not sure, but definitely worth checking out if you have an e-reader. So moving on, Gone with the Wind by Margaret Mitchell. This is another one I've already read. I read it when I was 11, 12, quite a while ago. And I also gave my copy to my high school so they could have a little library in the office because my high school didn't have its own school library. I don't think anyone ever read it. I think it's probably still there. Part of it fell apart and I had to tape it back together. So that might have been a deterrent. Like the cover has come off. I had to make a new cover out of like a piece of dilapidated folder and write Gone with the Wind on it. So this was a book that was also on my quarter of a century makes a girl think video for books I want to reread. And this is about Scarlett O'Hara, and she is a bossy 16-year-old when the book starts. And she quickly becomes her family's main hope of survival in the U.S. Civil War, which destroys their way of life. And this is an intense drama with several problematic aspects, which is part of the reason why I want to read it again, because I think I was a little bit too young when I read it the first time. And I remember there was a lot of like good writing and good characterization. So I am really excited to see what I think of it as an adult. And I have watched the movie several times. And another book I've read and would like to reread is Good Omens by Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett. And I read this when I was an early teen. I was in high school. I think I was 14. And I borrowed it from a friend. So I didn't have a copy for myself. And it was 99p on Kindle. So I was like, I'm definitely going to reread this. So I bought it. And I love this book because it was so clever and so funny. And I also love the TV show, even though it cut my favorite line from the book for no reason. Like the same scene is there. They just cut that line, and it's a brilliant line. Whatever. So Aziraphale and Crowley are an angel and a demon who are friends, and they like living among the humans, so they decided they must stop the apocalypse, which is scheduled for next Saturday. So they have a ticking clock and a lot of chaos, and it's great. Next up, I've got Kushiels Dart by Jacqueline Carey, and this was recommended to me by a friend, so it's kind of on my radar, and then it came up on BookBub discounted, so I got it. Phaedra is a young woman who was born with a scarlet mote in her left eye. Sold into indentured servitude as a child, her bond is purchased by Anafiel Delaunay, a nobleman with a very special mission, and the first one to recognize who and what she is. Phaedra is trained equally in the courtly arts and the talents of the bedchamber, but above all, the ability to observe, remember, and analyze. Almost as talented as a spy as she is a courtesan, Phaedra stumbles upon a plot that threatens the very foundation of her homeland. So this sounds layered and intense, and it is the first in a series. I think it's a trilogy, so there's a lot to look forward to on this one. A more recent publication, Madam by Phoebe Wynne, and this has like dark academia vibes, but it's set in a boarding school, not a university. For 150 years, high above rocky Scottish cliffs, Caldenbray Hall has sat untouched, a beacon of excellence in an old ancestral castle. A boarding school for girls, it promises the young women lucky enough to be admitted will emerge resilient and ready to serve society. Into its illustrious midst steps Rose Christie, a 26-year-old classics teacher, Caldenbray's new head of the department and the first hire for the school in over a decade. At first, Rose is overwhelmed to be invited to the institution whose prestige is unrivaled, but she quickly discovers that behind the school's elitist veneer lies an impenetrable, starkly traditional culture that she struggles to reconcile with her modernist belief, not to mention her commitment to educating girls of the future. It also doesn't take long for Rose to suspect that there's more to the secret circumstances surrounding the abrupt departure of her predecessor, a woman whose ghost lingers everywhere, than anyone is willing to let on. In her search for this mysterious former teacher, Rose instead uncovers the darkness that beats at the heart of Caldenbray, forcing her to confront the true extent of the school's nefarious purpose and her own role perpetuating it. Does that not sound so intriguing. Moving on to nonfiction, Once a Grand Duchess, Xenia, sister of Nicholas II. This is a biography of Xenia, sister of Nicholas II of Russia, and gives a new angle on the Romanov story and provides new information on relationships within the family after the revolution. Important new letters and photographs are also included. So I'm hoping that the photos show up in the Kindle version. They should, right? Next, I have Repsotic by Laura Thalassa. And this is the first in the Bargainer series, and I think it's fantasy romance. Calypso Lilith is a siren with a very big problem, one that stretches up her arm and far into the past. For the past 7 years, she's been collecting a bracelet of black beads up her wrist, magical IOUs for favors she has received. Only death or repayment will fulfill the obligations. Only then will the beads disappear. Everyone knows that if you need a favor, you go to the bargainer to make it happen. He's a man who can get you anything you want at a price. Everyone knows that sooner or later, he always collects. But for one of his clients, he's never asked for repayment. Not until now. When Callie finds the Fae King of the Night in her room, a grin on his lips and a twinkle in his eye, she knows things are about to change. So Becca from Becca and the Books and Ashley from A Frolic Through Fiction really liked the series, so I thought I would give it a try, especially because it was discounted. Their recommendations have been hit and miss for me, so we'll see. Another fantasy series, Sorcerer of the Crown by Zancho. At his wit's end, Zacharias' wife? Freed slave, eminently proficient magician, and sorcerer royal of the Unnatural Philosophers, one of the most respected organizations through all of Britain, ventures to the border of fairyland to discover why England's magical stocks are drying up. But when his adventure brings him in contact with the most unusual comrade, a woman with immense power and an unfathomable gift, he sets on a path which will alter the nature of the sorcery in all of Britain and the world at large. And I also got the sequel, The True Queen. So I have no idea what to expect from this. I know that Zancho wrote Blackwater Sister, which I also want to read, but this was the discounted series, so I got that. And then I have Sweet Sweet Revenge Limited by Jonas Jonasson. And this is the same author that wrote The 100-Year-Old Man Who Climbed Out the Window and Disappeared. So I have seen that movie. I haven't read the book. I would like to, and that was great. So I'm hoping that this is also great. It is described as a madcap novel. A Swedish man betrays his ex-wife and abandons his son, only to find himself the target of their revenge. So, that's all the description says. So I have no idea what to expect, but it sounds chaotic. And then I've got Sweet Hand by N.G. Peltier, or Peltier, possibly. And Jess Owens recommended this book, so obviously I need to read it immediately. I hear there is a sassy cat in it. So I went to look it up, and it was then also discounted, so it was a win-win. And this is the first in a series, so I'm hoping to also get the rest of the books at some point. After a public meltdown over her breakup from her cheating musician boyfriend, Cherise swore off guys in the music industry and dating in general for a while, preferring to focus on her growing pastry chef business. So this sounds like it's going to have a lot of great descriptions of food, which I love, but they also make me so hungry. It's a blessing and a curse. When Cherise's younger sister reveals she's getting married in a few months, Cherise hopes that will distract her mother enough to quit harassing her about finding a guy, settling down, and having kids. But her mother's matchmaking keeps intensifying. Cherise tries to humor her mother, hoping if she feigns interest in the eligible bachelor she keeps tossing her way, she'll be off the hook. But things don't quite go as planned. Turns out for the first time in ages, she and Kieran King, the most annoying man ever, are on the island at the same time. Avoiding him is impossible, especially when Kieran's close friend is the one marrying her sister, and he's the best man to her maid of honor. Kieran doesn't know what to make of Cherise now. They've always butted heads. To him, she's been a stuck-up brat who seeks attention, even while he secretly harbored a crush on her. Now with Cherise's sister marrying one of his good friends, he can't escape her as the wedding activities keep throwing them together. So this sounds so cute and so funny, sort of in the Talia Hibbert vein, and I love the Brown sisters. I've talked about them plenty before, so I will shout about them for now. So I am so pumped for this one. I hope that I can get to it in July. Another nonfiction book, this one is called The Astors, and it's about the Astor family by Virginia Cowles. Maybe it's Cowles. Anyway, I'm a huge fan of the Bowery Boys New York City History podcast, which talks about the Astor family a lot because they had a lot of impact on the city of New York. And I saw this book was discounted and I was all over it. This book was first published in 1979, so I am definitely a little late to the party on this one. So I'm hoping to read it soon, and especially it's only 256 pages. So it sounds like easy to get through. And this description is a little long, but there are so many Astor family members that I felt like I had to include them all. The Astors, whose immense fortune came from furs, ships, and real estate, whose mansions bejeweled Fifth Avenue, Newport, and England, who became leaders first in America, then in Britain, of polite society, whose births and deaths, private feuds and public scandals, political ambitions, and philanthropical munificence have fascinated the rest of the world for close to 2 centuries. The story of their rise to prominence, their long reign, of their influence and importance is more than a saga of rich and unusual family, for it illuminates from a unique vantage point the history of the past 200 years. When 20-year-old John Jacob Astor arrived in icebound Baltimore from Germany in 1783, his ambition was to live comfortably from the sale of musical instruments. At his death in 1848, he was the richest man in America. He ruled over an empire and had founded a dynasty. Today's generations of Astors, still wealthy, lead influential but less flamboyant lives than their predecessors, as modest businessmen, horse breeders, playboys, philanthropists, and novelists. But between them and their ancestor John Jacob, who spent his early years trudging along Indian trails, bartering for furs, and his last 14 years quadrupling his fortune many times over on Manhattan real estate and rentals, lies a peerless array of characters, social and political forces in their own times, whose power and prestige continues to be felt today. There was William Backhouse Astor, frugal and somber, who loathed social gatherings. There was Southerner Charlotte Augusta, who during the Civil War raised and equipped a regiment of black soldiers to fight for the North. There was Caroline Astor, who gave balls costing as much as $200,000, my hero. There was the vindictive, prickly William Waldorf Astor, who unsuccessfully ran for Congress. There was an Astor feud settled only by the prospect of financial gain with the creation of the Waldorf Astoria, designed to bring exclusiveness to the masses, a glittering, incandescent fantasy. And there was Nancy Astor, vociferous member of parliament and leader of the Cliveden set. From the freewheeling entrepreneurial days of the early 19th century through 2 world wars to today, the Astors have been in the forefront of their age, both here and abroad, luminaries of politics, society, and culture. Through 5 generations in all their splendor, in a richly anecdotal narrative interwoven with paintings, drawings, and photographs, making vivid the people, their mansions, their rise to social prominence in the United States and England. Here, then, are the Astors. That was so long. So I'm hoping to become Caroline Astor when I grow up and host balls and be an eccentric weirdo. Then I've got The Burning by Laura Bates. And Laura Bates is the founder of the Everyday Sexism Project, and she's written several books, but I think they're all nonfiction. I think this is her first fiction book. So I need to read her nonfiction at some point, but I haven't yet. So Anna and her mother have moved hundreds of miles to put the past behind them. Anna hopes to make a fresh start and escape the harassment she's been subjected to, but then rumors and whispers start, and Anna tries to ignore what is happening by immersing herself in learning about Maggie, a local woman accused of witchcraft in the 17th century. A woman who was shamed silence and whose story has unsettling parallels to Anna's own. So this book sounds like it's very informed about the nonfiction research that Laura Bates has done. With the historical parallels, it's very clear that she's setting us up to see what has changed in the past 300 years and what depressingly has not. So this next one is a true crime book, and I don't read a whole lot of true crime because I find it can be a little salacious and unsettling sometimes. So this is The Crime of the Century by Dennis Brio and William J. Martin. And this is about Richard Speck and his mass murder of several student nurses. And I know this story vaguely because Karen Kilgariff and Georgia Hardstark covered this on My Favorite Murder in the very early days of the podcast. So I would like to know more about this. And this was first published in 1993, and I'm hoping it doesn't read as too salacious. I'm hoping it gives a lot of focus to the victims and empathy for them and their families. So on July 14th, 1966, Richard Franklin Speck murdered 8 student nurses in their quiet Chicago townhouse. He broke in as the victims slept, bound them one by one, and then stabbed and strangled them. By morning, only one of the young nurses had miraculously survived. The barbarity of the attack shocked a nation and opened a new chapter in the history of American crime, mass murder. So I am interested to see what's happening with this, as it's from the early 90s. I don't have huge hopes, but we'll see. And then another history nonfiction book, The Men Who Lost America by Andrew O'Shaughnessy. And I went to an event with the author of this book. He was giving a talk about this when I was at university, and I've finally managed to get a copy of it, and it was also discounted. So I'm extra happy. At this event, I met one of my closest friends, so it's got a lot of nostalgia attached to it as well. So weaving together the personal stories of 10 prominent men who directed the British dimension of the war, the American Revolution War, that war. Historian Andrew O'Shaughnessy dispels the incompetent myth and uncovers the real reasons why the rebellious colonials were able to achieve their surprising victory. This includes King George III, Prime Minister Lord North, military leaders like General Burgoyne and the Earl of Sandwich, and some other people. I remember in his talk he went through them all, and I immediately forgot everything. So clearly I need to read this book and refresh my memory. Yet another nonfiction. This is The Romanovs by Simon Sebag Montefiore. And this book came out in 2016, and I've been wanting to read it ever since. This is the second Romanov book on this list, so I clearly have a theme going. And I'm familiar with some of the more famous Romanov family members, especially the last Tsar, Nicholas II, and his, doomed family. There's also a great episode of Noble Blood about Tsar Nicholas by Dana Schwartz, and she's also a guest on You're Wrong About, another great podcast, where she discusses specifically Anastasia. And I'll put links to those in the description box. And I would suggest that you check them out. The Romanovs were the most successful dynasty of modern times, ruling a sixth of the world's surface for 3 centuries. How did one family turn a war-ruined principality into the world's greatest empire, and how did they lose it all? This is the intimate story of 20 czars and czarinas, some touched by genius, some by madness, but all inspired by holy autocracy and imperial ambition. Montefiore's gripping chronicle reveals the secret world of unlimited power and ruthless empire building, overshadowed by palace conspiracy, family rivalries, sexual decadence, and wild extravagance, with a global cast of adventurers, courtesans, revolutionaries, and poets from Ivan the Terrible to Tolstoy and Pushkin to Bismarck, Lincoln, Queen Victoria, and Lenin. My Favorite Murder also has an episode about the Romanovs, so I'll put that in as well. Obviously, it's not a history podcast, but it's still a fun ride. I know I mentioned Talia Hibbert earlier, and we finally come to one of her books, and that is Roommate Risk. And I love the Brown sisters, and I decided I needed more Talia Hibbert in my life. She is delightfully clever and funny, and her tweets and her newsletter are also great, so I would encourage you to sign up, and I'll give you a taste of her latest one. Bonjour, my perfect little possum. How are you today? I hope the answer is very well, thank you, and full of cake and generally entertained. And it's just the perfect way to start a newsletter. And the roommate risk is described thusly. Jasmine Allen believes in bad luck, great wine, and the seductive power of a stiletto heel. What she doesn't believe in is love. Her life is perfect without all that romance rubbish, until a plumbing disaster screws up everything and leaves Jazz homeless. Luckily, she has someone to turn to, her best friend Raoul. For 7 years, Raoul Khan has followed 3 simple rules. Don't touch Jasmine if you can't help it. Don't look at her arse in that skirt. And don't ever, ever tell her you love her. He should have added another rule. Do not, under any circumstances, let Jazz move into your house. So this is clearly a funny, cute romance, and I would like to get to it soon, hopefully in July, but I haven't made my TBR just yet. Then I got The Wilful Princess and the Piebald Prince by Robin Hobb, and all my other Robin Hobb books I've listened to on audio, but I couldn't find an audio version of this, so I had to buy the Kindle version, and thankfully it was also discounted. So this is a prequel novella to the Tawny Man trilogy about how wit magic was introduced to the royal farseer line of the 6 duchies. So it's not very long. I think it's 130 pages maybe. I've read it already. It was good. And then the last book on this list is Witches Steeped in Gold by Sienna and Smart. And this is a Jamaican-inspired fantasy about witches, so I am sold. Araya has spent her life in a cell, but every day brings her closer to freedom and vengeance. Jasmine is the queen's daughter, but unlike her sister before her, she has no intention of dying to strengthen her mother's power. Sworn enemies, these two witches enter a precarious alliance to take down a mutual threat. But power is intoxicating, revenge is a bloody pursuit, and nothing is certain, except the lengths they go to win this game. So it sounds like very intense sibling rivalry. I'm into it. So I've not read a lot of fiction set in the Caribbean or Caribbean-inspired settings. This one is. It must be remedied post-haste. I know that Sweet Hand is also set in the Caribbean, and the description isn't specified, but I think it's Trinidad. So these are all such exciting books, and I want to read them all immediately. There's so many on this list. It's going to take me a while to actually get through all of them. But here ends my Kindle book haul, and I know this video has become a Dana Schwartz fan video, but sorry not sorry. Dana's great. So please like this video, and I will keep bringing you more Dana Schwartz content. I mean book content. And you can also subscribe for more and follow me on social media, which I will have linked below. I will see you in my next video. Bye.